see that Egypt has a challenge in managing the changes after the revolution. And from my position, it's always kind of a question of being patient and see how that develops. And furthermore, it's a challenge for us as diplomats as well, to get to grip with what is going on and see how the parameters of change are unfolding. Well, I mean, that depends on how you measure it. I mean, there is no textbook for political change. There is no fixed parameters for a revolution. All will have different dynamics, and so is the case with Egypt. The point here is that you cannot turn Egypt fast around. This is like turning a supertanker. It is not like turning around very quickly a small boat. The systems here are huge. The number of people living here is very high. And there has been challenges in Egypt for a long period of time that now has to be addressed. And it will take time to change that. Yeah. I think also it's a question of management of expectation, not only from those who run the country, but also from the opposition and from normal people. And it's obvious that these expectations are not always synchronized. And we see that here in Egypt as well. But I mean, again, it's a question of having security to work. It's a question of how you deal with unrest when it erupts, like what we have seen over the last 2 days. And here again, I mean, the main challenge for managing this is for the Egyptian security forces. I mean, I'm not passing judgment on a daily basis on what's happening in Egypt. That's not my job. My job is to understand what's going on and then take a position and advise my authorities as to whatever reactions or statements we should have in regard to what's going on. That's my job. But I think we have a common agenda. The common agenda between Egypt and Norway relating to a visit of a president would be to widen and deepen the relationship. In doing that, there are different components. There is what I would call increased contacts at all levels, diplomatically and politically. There is an economic component in this, both a private sector component and a public investment, development aid component. And obviously there is a cultural component in this. So when we talk about widen and deepen, we mean widen and deepen. Widen and deepen doesn't happen at a fixed point in time, but a visit by an Egyptian president that has never before taken place will be a very important marker on that common ambition to widen and deepen. If you look at it historically, Norway has had a good relationship with Egypt. We have had close contact on important matters of happening in the region. The Palestinian file is one to mention in particular. We could also mention the contacts we've had over years relating to the management of the Nile River Basin. And I would like to say that for Norway as a country, I mean, we are a huge shipping nation. We are using the Suez Canal. We have a more than a fair share of the income of the Suez Canal authorities as our ships are passing both ways in the canal. We have had that since the canal opened. And we have an increasing number of tourists that are coming to Egypt. That number is almost as high now as it was in 2010. To have that further increased has to do with the general situation here and also with the security situation. When we talk about widening and deepening, I mean the things the private sector is looking at is financial stability, transparency, and basically, more generally, a rule of law being practiced and a fair degree of political stability. So all these matters will have to be taken into account. But we have major ambitions for our relationship with Egypt. It will take some time to turn our boat as well, but we'll get there. Well, I mean, there is one thing you never do, and that is to moralize with the electorate. Egypt will elect their own leaders. They're doing so. It's for the leaders to do politics, and it's for the opposition to work with those who are in power to find common solutions. We are not kind of judging people whether you have a kind of religious flavor on your party or not. I may tell you that we had a prime minister in Norway recently for almost 7 years who came from the Christian Democratic Party. We are used to these things. We have had similar colors of different parties in Europe for a long time. We will have to live with the parties that are here for a long time. And we can do that. What we are looking at in any country in the world from a perspective of values is how they relate to minorities, how they distribute the wealth, and how they look after their people. And to the extent we can assist in some of these things, we do. I mean, we are not a member of the European Union. Norway is not. We have our own policy on Egypt, and we carry that policy forward. How other actors, being that individual European countries or EU as a whole, may decide to play their game, that's up to them to decide. But as I said, we have an ambition to move forward with Egypt. We'll do that as fast as we can, and in the way we can get it done, and we have an ambition to get it done, whoever rules Egypt. One should never forget that relationship between states are between states and by those who run the states. And that's a baseline in all international politics.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a country where we have a complete freedom of expression. We think that's the only way to handle things. We think that's a basic value in all democracy. And we think it's a basic value to have a free press. To the extent the freedom of the press is limited, we will always be critical, and we will be pronounced critical to that. That's nothing particular for Egypt. It will happen wherever it takes place. And it's a basic thing for us. What we see, and if you go back only 4 to 5 years in time, we and other countries in Europe has, because of this freedom, come into conflict in other parts of the world, because that freedom of expression is dramatic. It may have dramatic consequences, and we have been able to live with that. We are not going to compromise in Europe on our freedom of expression because people in other parts of the world don't like the way we handle it. Listen, I'm not into the nitty-gritties on the discussions and rumors and speculation in Egyptian politics. If I should fill up my agenda with that, I wouldn't get done what I'm here to do. I mean, we are well aware of those discussions. Obviously, we are following them, but far from me is it to make any comments whatsoever on that sort of issues.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. First of all, those who win the elections win the elections. We are used to that. And we are used to that people lose elections and they end up in opposition. Well, then it's a question of how you play your cards. You have to play your cards. For all politicians, it goes that they have to kind of optimize their influence. And then that's the challenge for the Egyptian opposition as well. I mean, what we have in Egypt after the revolution is a new Egypt. I think when you look at how you play your different roles, it's new for everybody. The opposition is not used to be opposition in the way they are after the revolution compared to what they were before. Similarly, on those who won the elections, they are not used to be sitting in the seat they're sitting. You will have all sorts of turmoils in such a situation, and for the system to kind of settle finally, you need to carry forward the election, conduct them in a proper way, and then gradually get the democratic system to work out, both for those being in government and in the dialogue between the opposition and the government. This is a complicated affair. If you look at the changes in Eastern Europe that took place before and after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we could observe that different countries had their own structure of dealing with the changes in politics between those sitting in government and those sitting in opposition. And the historic experience from Europe is that it had to go back and forth quite a number of times before the system was gradually settling. I think the same will happen here. To reset Egypt politically is something that has to take time, and it will take time.
Circumstances.
Well, I'm not sending diplomatic messages. Where we send messages is when our minister talks with the responsible Egyptian politicians. My job is to take care of Norwegian interest on a day-to-day basis. We do that in the way we deem most appropriate. We send the messages we need to say, and we don't feel compelled to run public diplomacy on these things. A very important part of the relationship between countries is that you can operate several levels of communication. And we have very good contacts developed here in Cairo and in Egypt. We are going to continue developing them. We have had a very open dialogue, and we have a very open spectrum of contacts. We have not, neither in Egypt nor elsewhere in the Middle East, limited these contacts to be focused on one group in particular to the expense of others. Our Middle East politics has always been based on wide contacts, over time, systematically worked out, and that's why we are here in Egypt, and that's why we have a broad dialogue into the new Egypt as well, with the opposition and with those being in government.